Hi everyone, this is just a little discussion of this gadfly section in the apology. Now there are a lot of great parts in the apology, but we're focusing on this gadfly paragraph because it really hits all of those three big questions for philosophy. Okay, so just a quick refresher here, the three big questions that we're dealing with are, what's the nature of reality? That's number one. Is there a God? If so, what is God like? And what kind of being am I? Oop, there's three. So those big three questions are what are governing philosophy. And if we turn to the gadfly paragraph, we can see how Socrates is starting to set the foundation for us to work through those three questions in a systematic way. Okay, so just let's give a quick summary of what's going on here. Socrates is representing himself as a unique individual whose job, given to him by the god, is to agitate people and to bother them, and in doing so, to try to expose their weaknesses. And his argument is that he's a gadfly attached to a horse, and the horse is the state. And the horse is kind of slow and lumbering and covered in flies. This is not a very attractive image and not what you would want your state to be characterized, especially if you're sitting on the jury. But Socrates is saying just how like flies swarm around horses, he is on this slow, lumbering, dim-witted horse, which is the state, and he is stinging it. And he is stinging the people in the society to try to awaken them. And he's bothering them, and he kind of pokes at them and pesters them to try to expose their ignorance and try to get them to think about who they are and who they are in relation to this society. And he argues that this is a really great service that he's performing for the Athenians. And it's so great, in fact, that he is so unique in doing it, he doesn't even charge to pester people all day. And that is amazing, because he's saying that this is a mission given to him by God to bug these people. And if he had been being selfish, he would charge for his services of pestering others. But he hasn't. He is a poor man, not charging for his services. And so when we combine all these things, the fact that he's poor, he's not charging, he's consistently bothering the Athenians, and he sees this as a religious message, a mission sent by the god. On these bases, he says that the Athenians should not condemn him. Let's think about it for a minute. On one level, yes, he's being helpful, I guess, to bother people and expose their ignorance, but he's also probably really, really annoying a lot of Athenians. Just think of how you would feel if someone saw it as their mission in life to expose your ignorance to society. This is what Socrates is doing. He's not really making friends. And then using the imagery of saying the state is like a big smelly horse isn't really helping his case. And he's probably doing it on purpose. He's Socrates. Okay, so let's go through some main points here. He sees himself as an agitator for the greater good. He represents himself as given by God. That's an interesting charge. And it's a particularly interesting thing to think about when we realize that he's being brought up on charges of impiety, which essentially means that they argue that Socrates is causing people to go away from the gods. But here he is giving this whole big paragraph about how his mission of pestering people is a God-given mission. How do we connect that to the charge of impiety? When we think about this, why would he use that kind of imagery? Why would he say he was given by God if he's being brought up on charges of being blasphemous? Also, why did Socrates have to use this really insulting imagery of a horse and a fly? There's a whole lot of other metaphors. He could have used a farming metaphor, an agricultural thing. Instead, he calls the state a big smelly horse. Okay, so we have a lot to think about. Let's work through these three questions. We have, what is the nature of reality? Where is there a God? If so, what is God like? And what kind of being am I? let's start with the "is there a God? If so, what is God like?" charge, because that's definitely coming through here. So he's arguing that contrary to what other Athenians would think, his mission of annoying people is given by God, or by the God, more accurately, and that helps us characterize this God figure in Socrates' world. So for Socrates, the God ultimately wants ignorance to be exposed, and he does his or her or its work through a vehicle, in this case Socrates. Now the question we have to ask ourselves is whether that matches up with what the Athenians think of the divine. Probably not. They probably don't think the divine is choosing to work through Socrates to expose their own ignorance to the world. Okay. We also have this question of what is the nature of reality. This is where that fly horse imagery comes in, because ultimately Socrates is insulting what people see, and he's doing it for a reason. He's saying, if I bug you enough, you'll reveal who you really are. And in this case, Athens is a horse. And that's not real great. But it's about accepting ignorance and accepting base natures, and then trying to improve from there. And finally, what kind of being am I? We have a couple different ways we can answer this, one of which is because he's representing himself as a man on a mission, and he is trying to expose the ignorance of others, which means that at the very least he is saying that others are ignorant and need to be part of this engagement with him. He's saying exposing the ignorance of others is a virtue. And so essentially, what kind of being am I is someone who is or should always be on a quest to improve themselves, ideally through public embarrassment in Socrates' world. So that's a little tricky. The takeaway here should be that it's asking you to think about why Socrates would be trying to expose people's ignorance, how he does it, and how that connects to later philosophical traditions. Because we continue to do these things to pester and expose in order to try to come to a greater understanding of ourselves, just like Socrates is. And if you're not convinced, we actually have a discussion coming up later in this lesson about how we have modern gadflies who frame themselves in the same way that Socrates did. Okay, so I just want you to leave this thinking about those three big philosophical questions. What's the nature of reality? Is there a God? If so, what is God like? And what kind of being am I? All three can find their roots in this gadfly paragraph. Okay? If you have any questions, just shoot me an email.